Listening to Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. We're coming to you live from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studio in Lubbock, Texas. This is Friday night, September the 22nd, and I'm excited to be here. We've got a little bit of technical difficulty again tonight. We're having a little trouble with the radio part of our show, and I'm just going to go ahead and we're just going to do this whole show just on the Facebook and the YouTube and X. And if you get a chance to come back, if you're searching for us from the radio, we're playing an old broadcast on 98.7 tonight. The one that we broke down, the body keeps the score. So we're going to work through those technical difficulties on the radio part, but we're going to go ahead and produce the show tonight and give it to you tonight. I'm excited to be here. I can't think of anything more exciting to do on Friday evening than to be here with you. And that's the truth, really. I was thinking about that before we started the show. I was thinking to myself, because I was going to say that I am. When I say I'm excited to be here with you, I'm really excited to be here with you. I'm excited to have the opportunity, and I'll tell you why that I'm excited. Because I had some people this week that said, "Hey, we're listening to your show, and we sure are learning a lot." And it was like, "Hey, that's fantastic. I'm glad somebody is able to get something from this show." And then I had a student that's at Parker University, which is where I went to chiropractic school, and he's in town for a CrossFit competition this weekend. And he came by the office, and some of my good friends from Roswell, MJ and T. Lewis, came by the office, and we were just sitting there talking, and he said, "Man, you really convicted me on that show when you were talking about carbonated water." And I didn't ever think about it that way. And so I thought to myself, I was like, what is more exciting than that? Like, it's like if you can actually share something that you learned from somebody, or share something that you learned with somebody that makes their life better, that's just about the most exciting thing I could think of to do on a Friday night. So that's why we're here. We're going to talk for a little while. We might can cut it off a little bit early tonight if we want to. I've got plenty of stuff to talk about. But I was thinking about, while I was getting ready for the show tonight, I was listening to some country music on YouTube, and I just kind of scrolled through all the choices and all the videos that are on my YouTube channel, not on my channel, but on my feed. And I just got to thinking, man, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of information out there from a lot of different people. And how do you know what to believe and what not to believe? And how do you know what to follow without getting confused? And what are you supposed to do with one after the other, after the other, after the other? And I could see where someone might get lost. And when I have the feedback like I've received this week, and I've had people talk to me about, I really appreciate what you're doing, and I really have learned some things so far from you. It's like that's the honesty of our show. The honesty of our show is, number one, I'm not going to be afraid to talk about anything. I mean, I talked about some of the things that the CDC said this week, right, on the earlier shows, and I wasn't coming at them, and I wasn't trying to be immature about the process, but I was also, but I want to share the things that I learned over my lifetime, and it's really the last 36 years since I got my first chiropractic adjustment that got me to the place where I am now. And we started that on the very first show that we did. We talked about that, and that was 3 weeks ago. So we've gotten 3 weeks worth of shows under our belt. We've got to deal with some of the technical difficulties that happen, but it's really true. It's life. You have to deal with that stuff, and you just have to figure out how you're going to handle it and what attitude you're going to have about it, and then just move along. So, but I wanted to talk tonight about some of the sentences that I've heard over the last 36 years that's made me make the choices that I make in my life. And because it wasn't the choices that I make in my life now is not the way I was raised, and nothing against my parents. It was just in the 80s, we just didn't talk about this stuff. I mean, in my house, at least in my world, none of my friends talked about the stuff that we talk about. And it's like, how'd you get to be so weird? And it was a process. It was a process that took a long time to actually get to this level. That it's like, wow, you don't take Tylenol, and that's what I'm gonna break that down for you tonight. And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't take acetaminophen. Don't take any acetaminophen products. And I want to share with you why. Because I was coaching football in 1999. I was coaching football for Coach Spike Dykes at Texas Tech. I was on his staff, and Coach had been at Tech for a long time, and he decided that he was going to retire. And what happens in college football is when a coach retires, most of the time the staff doesn't get to stay. The staff has to. We just all lose our jobs, and so that's what happened. I was on the staff. I had spent 7 years of my life in Texas Tech football. I played for 4 years. I played quarterback. I walked on. I earned my scholarship. I broke my shoulder in the process. Rehabbed my shoulder. I set the school record for most passes in a game in 1992 against Texas. And like I invested deeply 7 years of my life into Texas Tech football. And then when Coach Dykes retired, it just all of a sudden was over. And I didn't have a job. And I had a wife and a child, and I didn't have a job. And my brother-in-law, who's a chiropractor here in Lubbock, he said, why don't you come work for me? And I literally looked at him and said, dude, you're the weirdest person I know. I'm not working for you. And he had this bucket. He had this bucket in his office right here. And it said, when you decide your drugs no longer serve you, please deposit them here. And I saw this bucket that he had in his office, and I told him, I said, Rick, you can stuff that up your nose, man. I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Like, when I get a headache, I'm going to take a Tylenol. And when I get acid reflux, I'm going to take a Rolaids. Because my daddy took Rolaids and my granddaddy took Tums. That's what we did. Like, Clemmons guys took Rolaids or Tums. You had to choose which one you were going with. And I may have told you that story, 3 weeks ago on our first show, but I want to make it even deeper now. But my brother-in-law just looked at me like, sometimes when you say something really stupid and the person, whether you have a parent or a teacher or a coach or something, they just kind of look at you like, boy, that was really stupid. And that's kind of how he looked at me. And I was wondering if he even thought this was worth his effort to try to get me to come work for him, because I didn't do a very good job that year I was working for him. But I learned a lot, and I learned some life-changing things. And that was after 12 years of getting adjusted. And so it was some of the things that I learned are the reasons that I do the things that I do today. And that's why I'm trying to share some of this information with you, because you may not have ever heard this before. And that's what we're trying to do with this show is provide you information with things that maybe you've never heard before, and maybe you've just you just kind of didn't know how to process it. Because I would hear sentences in his office. I would hear him say things like, you bleed a tablespoon or a teaspoon internally every time you take an aspirin. Like, every time you take an aspirin, you bleed a teaspoon internally, or 2 teaspoons internally. And man, I would think about that for a second. I'd be like, man, okay, that's interesting. Like, I didn't know that. I didn't know I bled internally, and so that was a really interesting thing right there that I never knew before. And then one of the things he would say is, he's like, you remember when we were in school, and there was 25 kids in our class, and 15 kids got the flu, and 10 kids didn't get the flu. It's like, well, how come those 10 kids didn't get the flu? And my first reaction was, well, because they weren't exposed to the flu virus. And he was like, really? And you remember third grade? Right? And so I would hear those sentences, and I would hear those sentences, and then what it would make me do is it made me started like try to study a little bit and see, is what he's saying real? Like, is what he's saying really true? And so that was after 12 years of getting adjusted, and I've been with him for 23 years, and so that was it. Just kind of it was 23 years of hang on there. All right, give me 1 second because they're wanting me back on the radio station, so I'll see what goes on right here. Sorry about the interruption. I'm not real sure what they're doing on there, but I'll try that. I apologize for the interruption right there. And I'm sorry about that, y'all. Give me just okay. Okay, so I would learn these sentences, I would hear these sentences, and then I would go study some of the things and try to learn from that and see if I could make sense of this new information that I was learning. And going and doing that led me on the journey to go to chiropractic school and then to start into this whole chiropractic wellness thing. And that's what we've been doing for the last 23 years. It's been 23 and a half years since I made that statement about that bucket that said you can just stuff that up your nose. Like that was March of 2000 that I went to work in his office. And since March of 2000, I've had Tylenol one time. I've had Advil one time, and I've had 3 antibiotics. And that's all. And those were because of tooth problems, right? And it's like, that's the only time that I've had that in the last 23 and a half years that I've put that stuff in my body. And it's based on the idea of some of the things that I've learned, right? It's like, and the more that I've studied it and the more that I've researched it and the more that I've looked into it, he was right. Like he really was right. If you want to live a good, healthy life like your body was intended to live, you need to stay away from some of that stuff. And I heard I saw an article today, or a Facebook post or a YouTube channel, something, whatever I was watching. I saw something today about how the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, is getting babies in breast milk. And they took the mamas and babies out of the studies because they didn't want to know the answer to the studies. And then they said when you get vaccinated, it just stays in your one spot in your arm and it causes an immune response. But now they know for a fact that it moves all throughout your body and it passes through mama's breast milk to the baby. So your newborn child is getting part of that vaccine. And I don't care about that part of it is between you and your family and your doctor and all that stuff. That's not my scope of practice. What I want to point out tonight and what I want to say about that is the people in charge of our health, what they call themselves healthcare providers, which I don't think there's any health in a lot of it myself, but the people in charge of health, especially when they get in those shots and all that stuff, they will lie right to your face. You will go and you'll have your practitioner tell you to take some Tylenol. And I want to just share with you, some things that might make you think about that. Like that maybe that there's some evidence out there in the world that says that's not the way you think, that's not a good idea. And I want to start off with this article right here. It's in Clinical and Experimental Pediatrics, June 14th, 2021. It says acetaminophen causes neurodevelopmental injury in susceptible babies and children. No valid rationale for controversy. That's the name. And it's done by a whole group of people from the University of Colorado at Boulder and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And they have 121 references. And what they're talking about is the autism spectrum disorder and acetaminophen. And there's been a drastic, steady 40-year climb in the incidence of autism. Acetaminophen, as well as the antidote for acetaminophen overdoses, N-acetylcysteine, which is really interesting, are listed by the World Health Organization as essential medicines for children. That right there is insanity to me. The World Health Organization is saying that acetaminophen is essential for children. Like, that's not factual, because essential means you can't live without it. If we say it's an essential protein, that means that your body can't make it. That means you have to get it from your diet, right? It's essential for kids is saying that they can't live without it. Well, I've got 2 kids and that were raised basically without it. Caitlin got it one time, 1/2 dose of Tylenol one time, and I was like, I'll never do that again. And so it's not essential. Despite worldwide acceptance of acetaminophen as a necessary medicine in the field of pediatrics, evidence that early life exposure to acetaminophen causes neurodevelopmental injury in susceptible babies and children has mounted for more than a decade. Evidence is diverse, including extensive work with laboratory animals, otherwise unexplained associations, factors associated with metabolism of acetaminophen, and some limited studies in humans. The evidence has reached an overwhelming level. This is not my words. These are words from the scientists and the researchers at the University of Colorado Boulder and at Chapel Hill, right? So acetaminophen use in the pediatric population is about 95%. Hence, it is impossible to find a control population to study the links between acetaminophen and autism. It is apparent that the use of acetaminophen in babies and young children, a relatively uncommon occurrence half a century ago, is now more common than not. Evidence points towards exposure between birth and approximately 5 years of age as being the period of highest risk, with the risk during prenatal exposure being significant in numerous studies. And it goes through this article. This whole article walks us through the problems with acetaminophen in children. This is right here, postnatal versus prenatal use of acetaminophen. Tragically, the public debate has not yet moved towards postnatal use of the drug, where relative and absolute risk are greater and evidence of neurodevelopment injury is strong to the point of being conclusive. So this is not coming from me. This is coming from a group of researchers at Colorado University and at North Carolina, right? And it's just going through there, and it's talking about what's going on and how there could be an association between acetaminophen and autism. Like, and if you're a mom or a dad and you go to your pediatrician or your nurse practitioner or whatever, and they're going to tell you to give your kids Tylenol, like, I wonder if they're going to have any of these conversations about that. And then why are we getting this prevalence that's going on like that? Why is there an increase, right? And so this is one article. This is just one article that talks about, because you know what? It goes, and we've talked about this before, right? Acetaminophen is detoxified in the liver by what we have, our major antioxidant called glutathione. And glutathione, if we get glutathione depletion, then we have a hard time dealing with that acetaminophen, and that can cause toxicity in the body. So that is one, just one article right there. So now here's another one right here. This is the New England Journal of Medicine, number 25, volume 331, pages 1675 to 1679, December 22nd, 1994. Risk of kidney failure associated with use of acetaminophen, aspirin, and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So this is from the New England Journal of Medicine, right? They're talking about it themselves. People who take analgesic drugs frequently may at increased risk of may be at increased risk of end-stage renal disease, but the extent of the risk remains unclear. We studied 716 patients treated for end-stage renal disease and 361 control subjects of similar age from Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. The study participants were interviewed by telephone about their past use of medications containing acetaminophen, aspirin, and other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. For each of the analgesic drug, the average use in pills per year and the cumulative intake in pills were examined for any association with end-stage renal disease. That's kidney failure, right? So the results. Heavier acetaminophen use was associated with an increased risk of end-stage renal disease in a dose-dependent fashion. A person who took on an average of 0 to 104 pills per year were used for reference. The odd ratio of end-stage renal disease was 1.4 for those who took 105 to 365 pills per year. And you think, well, how could I possibly take 105 pills per year? Well, that's not that much because you're probably taking 2 at a time, right? So you're talking about 50 days. So once a week, a little more than once a week, if you took 2 Tylenol once a week, then you increase your risk of end-stage renal disease by 1.4, the odds ratio, right? It was 2.1 for those who took 366 or more pills per year. And when a person who had taken fewer than 1,000 pills containing acetaminophen in their lifetime were used for reference, the odd ratio was 2.0 for those who had taken 1,000 to 4,999 pills and 2.4 for those who had taken more than 5,000 pills. So it just goes on to talk about how that is like you might end up with kidney failure by taking 1,000 Tylenol in your lifetime. Analgesic nephropathy was first described in 1950, so we get kidney disease, and the responsible drug contained phenacetin. I don't know how you say that. Then they were subsequently identified with and withdrawn from the market. Acetaminophen is a metabolite of that particular drug, right? So drug intake was categorized as light, 0 to 104 pills per year, or 0 to 2 pills per week. Moderate, 105 to 365 pills per year, or heavy, 366 or more pills per year. And cumulative intake was categorized as low, 0 to 999 pills. 0 to 999 pills in your lifetime is considered low intake, right? I've had 2 of those in the last 23 years, and I can promise you, unless I have some sort of major horrible cancer or something like that that's just got me down to the bone, some of those things that go on, that'll be the last 2 that I take. Because it's what I know about it is that you can cause yourself kidney disease by taking too much acetaminophen. And you think, well, okay, is that all you got for me? No, that's not all I have for you. Analysis, this one comes from Journal of Pediatrics, volume 107, number 3, March 2001, pages 519 through 523. Analysis of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs in meconium and its relation to persistent pulmonary hypertension of the newborn. Meconium is the first the first bowel movement, basically, of a newborn child. They're just flushing a lot of stuff out of there. So they're saying, can we find non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs in a newborn child? And does it have anything to do with anything? So they studied the objective of the study was to detect fetal exposure to non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, NSAIDs, by a meconium analysis and to determine the relationship between fetal exposure to NSAIDs and the development of persistent pulmonary hypertension of the newborn. In case control study of the inborn and outborn nurseries of a large urban medical center, meconium was collected from 101 newborn infants. 40 of them had been diagnosed with persistent pulmonary hypertension, right? So they've got a blood pressure problem, right? And based on clinical or echocardiograph criteria and 61 randomly selected healthy term infants. And we went through that right there, and it says the results. Infants with this hypertension had a mean gestation of 38.9 weeks and birth weight. That's not relevant. They had lower APGAR scores. The diagnosis with this hypertension were primary 25%. Get to the actual answer right there. It was significantly associated with the presence of at least one NSAID in meconium or the presence of meconium of aspirin, ibuprofen, or naproxen. So if mama's taking that baby's getting it. And if that baby's getting it, what it is actually doing is it's changing the way that baby's blood vessels are being formed. And that can cause that baby to have hypertension. And then they have to intervene inside that with the baby, as far as, and treat that with them right off the bat. Like they just started birth. I mean, they just started their life. And then the first thing they have to deal with is hypertension because their moms were exposed to NSAIDs. Their moms took NSAIDs, and that ended up with the baby, ended up with hypertension. Right? And it's like, that's not good. So here's another one. The role of oxidative stress, inflammation, and acetaminophen exposure from birth to early childhood in the induction of autism. So this is a totally different one. This is the Journal of International Medical Research, January 2017. A wide range of factors associated with the induction of autism is invariably linked with either inflammation or oxidative stress, and sometimes both. The risk factors for autism are associated with inflammation and the oxidative stress. The use of acetaminophen in babies and young children may be much more strongly associated with autism than its use during pregnancy, perhaps because of the well-known deficiencies in the metabolic breakdown of pharmaceuticals during early development, right? I'm not making a statement that acetaminophen causes autism. I'm not saying that. I'm reading research papers that are talking about the association between those two things. And I'm questioning why exactly we would need to do that and we would go that direction. And what I think is the answer to that is because I trust the people that I take my child to. I trust them to tell me the truth. And I need them to tell me the truth. But I'm not sure that they're telling us the truth. And I'm not sure that they're actually can defend the argument against them. And so you get to be weird after a while, right? And I'm not being a conspiracy theorist. I'm reading articles from the New England Journal of Medicine. I'm reading articles from JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association. I'm reading articles from the Journal of International Medical Research. And this one's coming from the authors are from Duke University Medical Center, Harvard Medical School, and the University of Colorado at Boulder, right? We're not just being sensational right now. And we're not just talking about like some sort of crazy theory that this chiropractor in Lubbock is talking about. We're talking about interference in wellness. We're talking about disruption of innate intelligence and subluxation in the body. What I'm saying is that you know what? These things are not good for us, and they can cause problems for us. And then some of these problems you can't undo. Once your child has autism or is on the spectrum, then all of a sudden, how do you undo that? It's a difficult task to do that. There may be places that can get it done, but you might want to think about it. It's like, why do I want to jump right into taking that? And you can look at the things. You can go to our Facebook page and you can look at the different things that have acetaminophen in them. And a lot of times, there's an article, I don't have it pulled up for today, but there's an article that I got right off the National Institutes of Health, and it was talking about double dose of acetaminophen or acetaminophen with alcohol, and how those things can cause kidney disease or liver disease, right? And so after you do that for a long period of time, after you just keep going and keep going and keep going, and you read this thing and you read this thing, because what happens when you're in the wellness world, you go to wellness conventions, you go to do your continuing education classes in wellness areas, you subscribe to wellness publications and that sort of thing. And so you're reading over and over and over some of these things that have a negative effect on our body. And you're not making them up. And then someone comes to you and that person is sick. And it's like, man, that when they're sick, they're actually wanting to know, how do I get better? How do I get well? What can I do to solve this problem? Right? And that's where we work on it. Here's one right here. The Journal of Neurology, October 18th, 2016. The title of the article is Calcium Supplementation and Risk of Dementia in Women with Cerebrovascular Disease. So the study included 700 Swedish women ages 70 to 92, followed for 5 years. The average recommended dose of calcium supplements in Sweden was 1,000 milligrams a day. The key points from the article: dementia and osteoporosis are leading causes of disability in the elderly. Because calcium deficiency contributes to osteoporosis, daily dietary calcium intake of 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams is recommended. Such a large calcium intake through the diet alone can be difficult. Therefore, calcium supplements are widely used. I don't know that that's necessarily a true statement. Osteoporosis are leading cause of disability in the elderly. Okay, because calcium deficiency contributes to osteoporosis. Calcium deficiency might contribute to osteoporosis a little bit, but there are multiple factors that contribute to osteoporosis. Not just you just want your calcium levels to be proper. And remember what we talked about early in the week? We want that magnesium to calcium ratio to function properly. The article goes on to say calcium supplementation may increase the risk of developing dementia in elderly women. Women treated with calcium supplements had a higher risk of developing dementia, increased relative risk by 110%, and the subtype dementia with stroke increased by 340% than with women who did not take calcium supplementation. I didn't make this up. I'm reading it right out of the Journal of Neurology, October 18th, 2016. It's saying right there that the women had a higher risk of developing stroke and the subtype dementia with stroke at 340% if they were taking calcium than if they didn't. The frequency of fractures was 40.8% in the group that received calcium supplements and 20.8% in the group that did not. You had fewer fractures in the group that were not taking calcium. Because if you were really studying wellness and you were studying bone development and you were studying how you fire osteoblast and how you decrease osteoclast, which are the ones that break down your bone, then you would start looking at wellness things instead of just some of these things that we get that really don't make any sense. And here's another article right here in the Journal of the American Medical Association, volume 291, number 7, February 18th, 2004. The title of the article is Antibiotic Use in Relation to the Risk of Breast Cancer. And it goes in there and it talks about the results. Increasing cumulative days of antibiotics were associated with increased risk of incident breast cancer adjusted for age and length of enrollment. Increased risk was observed in all antibiotic classes studied, and the sub-analysis of having breast cancer fatally as the outcome. Conclusions: Use of antibiotics is associated with increased risk of incident and fatal breast cancer. That's coming from the Journal of the American Medical Association, right? So we just jump on antibiotics. We just go right. Well, I think I'll just take another antibiotic. I think we just need to take an antibiotic. It's like in the United States, more than 22.6 million antibiotic prescriptions for non-bacterial acute respiratory infections were filled in 1995 alone. Now we're talking about 20 years ago, right? Like and this is for non-bacterial acute respiratory infection. And it's talking about this is inappropriate prescriptions. It's just the tip of the iceberg, right? So what they're saying is, although the biological mechanisms through which antibiotics might alter cancer risk may also be relevant to other cancers, we selected breast cancer for the study because it is the topic of the only other epidemiological study of antibiotic use and cancer risk, and is an important cancer in women. What they're saying is it could apply to all cancers, right? So we just jump on an antibiotic like it's not any big deal. We just go out there and say, well, I'll just take me an antibiotic and then I'll just take another antibiotic and I'll just take another antibiotic. And it's like, well, maybe there's better ways, right? Maybe there's some things that we could do that might help us. And you say, well, what are those other ways? And I'll say, well, take your fish oil. And everybody that knows me laughs right now because everybody that knows me knows that's exactly what I'm going to say, right? Take your fish oil. Like, Jason, I don't understand why you say stuff like that. Like, would you just leave us alone with fish oil? Nope. Here's one from you, The Lancet. That's Harvard. Volume 357, June 2nd, 2001. Fatty fish consumption and the risk of prostate cancer. Consumption of fatty fish might reduce the risk of prostate cancer, although epidemiological studies of fish consumption are rare. We studied the association between fish consumption and prostate cancer in a population-based prospective cohort of 6,272 Swedish men. During 30 years of follow-up, men who ate no fish had twofold to threefold higher frequency of prostate cancer than those who ate moderate to high amounts did. Our research suggests that fish consumption could be associated with decreased risk of prostate cancer. Now, some people might get on to me and say that's not a randomly controlled clinical trial and all the rest of that stuff. That's fine. It's just information that you might take from the Lancet that says, hey, you know what? Taking your fish. Now, if you live in Sweden, you might have some fresh fish. Or if you live on the coast, you might have some fresh fish. So if you have the fresh fish, then you don't have to worry about your fish oil ratio, your omega-6-3 ratio, and you don't have to take your fish oil. But if you don't live in the middle of the ocean or around water and you don't eat a lot of fish, then you might consider taking your fish oil. And what we would do in our office is we would test your omega-6-3 ratio. Well, it's a finger prick test, right? All we got to do is prick your finger, get a little bit of blood, put it on a little card, send it to this company, and they'll give us back a report, and they'll tell us exactly what your omega-6-3 ratio is. And that might help you not get cancer. I'm going to go through a couple more of these. Omega-3 fatty acids in major depressive disorder, a preliminary double-blind placebo-controlled trial. Here we go. This is in European Neuropsychopharmacology, 2003, page 267 to 271, right? Okay. Patients with depression have been extensively reported to be associated with the abnormality of omega-3 fatty acids, and including significantly low EPA and DHA in cell tissue contents and dietary intake. However, more evidence is needed to support its relationship. In this study, we conducted an 8-week double-blind placebo-controlled trial comparing omega-3s with placebo on top of the usual treatment in 28 patients with major depressive disorder. Patients in the omega-3 group had significantly decreased scores on the 21 item Hamilton rating scale for depression than those in the placebo group. From the preliminary findings in the study, omega-3 fatty acids could improve the short-term course of illness and were tolerated in patients with major depressive disorder, right? So if your brain's not working properly, you may be low on EPA and DHA. And if you took your fish oil, your brain might actually work better, which might get rid of your depression. And then last night, because we had technical difficulties on Wednesday, last night, what we found out was we broke down the book Spark, right? And what did the book tell us? That exercise, 30 minutes a day, 4 days a week, increased dopamine, increased serotonin, increased norepinephrine, the adrenaline in our brain, right? Helped us control our glutamate and our GABA, and release brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF, which helps our brain learn more. It gave us a better sense of self. It gave us better opportunities, and it helped us grow and be smarter just by getting some aerobic exercise, right? And they remember, like, if you listened to the show last night, they had to use aerobic exercise because they couldn't do anaerobic exercise because Dr. Rady said it's hard to get mice to lift weights, which is kind of funny. That's his little joke right there, right? But if you're thinking of things from a wellness standpoint, if you've got depression, what's one of the first things you can do? Get on your feet and walk, right? What's another thing that you can do? Take your fish oil, right? What's another thing that you can do? Be social. Get out there and be social, right? You can do all those things. And we've got articles, we've got research that says that those things have a really good effect on people with depression, right? You can be well. You can do well things, and you can be well. And you don't have to live your life on a whole list of medications that might be causing harm to you that no one tells you about. Here's one right here. Pathologic indicators of degradation and inflammation in human osteoarthritic cartilage are affected by exposure to omega-3 fatty acids. This is in the Journal of Arthritis and Rheumatism, Article 46, Issue 6, 2002. And we're talking about osteoarthritis, right? I get that a lot from people. Man, I've got arthritis in my hands. I've got arthritis in my joints. I got arthritis in my knee. And I'm not talking about disease arthritis things. I'm talking about osteoarthritis that people just get, right? The results of this study, and I think this one, I don't remember how many they had right there, but the results: supplementation with omega-3s reduced in a dose-dependent manner the endogenous and interleukin-1 induced release of proteoglycan metabolites. I know that's a lot of jargon right there. It reduced the chemical compounds that create inflammation and decrease the osteoarthritis in the joint, basically is what it's saying. It's just got a bunch of big words that I'll get in trouble for talking about. But similarly, expression of mRNA for these different things was also specifically abolished with omega-3 supplementation. Conclusion: these studies show that the pathologic indicators manifested in human osteoarthritis cartilage can be significantly altered by exposure to the cartilage to omega-3 fatty acids, but not to other classes of fatty acids. So it's saying right there, and that's where we talked about our inflammation, right? And our arachidonic acid and how those things worked. When we have too much arachidonic acid, our body's going to create inflammation, and that inflammation is going to cause problems in our joints. And so one of the ways that we could decrease our inflammation is to take our omega-3 fatty acids. I had a friend of mine text me last night, and he's a chiropractor in a different state. And he was wanting to know, what do you use for pain management in your office? Like natural pain management, pain killers or whatever. And I thought it was really, it kind of caught me off guard there, because I didn't have an answer for him. Like, I don't use anything. Like, if you say natural painkillers, What do you do for a natural painkiller in your office? Like I thought about that and I was like, I don't have an answer for that. I don't have any ice. That's what we would use in our office. We would use ice, and then we would use omega-3 fatty acids and turmeric. Those are the two things that are the things that I would use in the office. I would use exercise. I would use adjustments. I would use the things working on your brain. Like I don't know. That is it. I thought it was a cool question because it really got me thinking. Like we don't use anything at all for pain relief in the office. We try to get you to function properly, and that's really what we try to do at the Rock Health and Wellness Center. I hope all this wasn't too much for a Friday night. And if you're catching us later on the weekend, thanks. I know you guys catch some of this stuff. A lot of you guys are out the movies or whatever tonight, and I appreciate that. The thing that we're trying to do, the thing that I'm trying to do for you is bring you information that might help you live a better life. That's what the point of this show is about. And create a place that you can come to help you live a better life. That's what we're trying to do. And that's what we're working hard to do. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to do it. And I'm loving this show because I'm loving the feedback. If you get one person and that one person says, man, you really helped me be better. Like that's enough. That's enough to just keep after it right there. So I appreciate you guys listening. Thanks for the feedback that we're getting. If you have questions, you can always text our office. Our office phone is a cell phone, and I keep it with me pretty much all the time. And our number is 806-794-0400. I'd be glad to talk to you about any of your troubles that you've got. I'd be glad to get you in here and work on you or at least take you through all the things that we do. And what we do is at the end of it, we give you an entire notebook, and that's a health evaluation report. And it's got all your x-rays, all your tests, your right eye score, your reflex app, everything that we do, the heart rate variability, the heart sound recorder, your omega-3 ratio test, anything that we do for you here in the office, we sit down, we give you a notebook, we give you all the findings so that you can take that with you. We present you with a treatment plan that might address the things that you're dealing with. And then we've got the facility here to take care of you if you need somebody to take care of you. Next week, I'm excited for the show. We'll be hitting some of these same topics. We'll talk about some of the things that we do. We'll try to bring you as much wellness information as we can. And then on Wednesday night, if we can get all the technology to work right, we're going to break down The Body by Bill Bryson on our book review next Wednesday. And you're really going to want to watch this show because this is a great book right here. And it's very thick. It takes a long time to get through. But if you ever wanted to listen to a book that was entertaining, that talked about your body, that might teach you some wellness things, this book is it. These guys did such a good job that writing this book and breaking down the entire body. It just goes through all the systems of the body. It might take us a couple weeks to get through this book on our book review, but I love this book. It was so much fun to listen to. It was so much fun to break down. So if you guys want to have a good time on Wednesday night or watch the Wednesday night show, we will be breaking down The Body. Other than that, that's all I got for you tonight. It's a little bit shorter show because we didn't have the radio to do. And if you got any questions, send them to me. Otherwise, you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.